Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ghost Stories with Kitten, where I read you true paranormal tales read to you by a real human and not AI. Before we begin today, we're going to be trying something a little bit different. Today we are going to be reading true Glitch in the Matrix stories. So it'll be a little bit different, and I hope you guys enjoy because they're really interesting. So, without further ado, let's begin. When I was a teenager, my family lived in a big 115-year-old brick house. Plenty of creepy stuff happened, but one night I was heading to bed when the door between the first floor kitchen and the basement stairs absolutely slammed shut. It had a unique sound that I recognized immediately as the kitchen/basement door. There were no windows open that could have caused a draft. Our dog was asleep on the second floor, and I was on the second floor. My parents were both asleep on the third floor attic, which had been converted into a master bedroom. None of us could have shut that door. It fucking terrified me. I worked up the courage to go investigate, carrying my hilariously teeny tiny pocket knife for protection. As I went downstairs, I turned on every light. When I reached the kitchen, the door was wide open. Even more freaked out, I ran back up to bed, leaving the lights on. A minute or two later, I heard a definitive, "Shh, okay," come from downstairs. I laid in bed and was ready to accept my demise. Eventually, I somehow fell asleep, and in the morning, I was there first downstairs. I woke up before my parents and the dog, and found that the lights were all off, and the basement door had been shut again. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10. I was at the car park of a pub in England, Southend. I remember seeing someone in their teens in a window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me, and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked who I was waving at, and I just said some lady in the window over there. I didn't think much of it. Now fast forward 10 years. It was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I was never allowed to do, going to the window. I then realized I was in the house looking over that same parking lot and remembering that same interaction all of those years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10 who was in said car park waved at me and I waved back. I felt like I knew her. I could not explain it, and I've never told anyone else about it until now. It really freaked me out. Was I waving at myself? Now, I've told this story before, but here goes. It's still new to this subreddit thread. When I was a kid, my family and I went for a walk on the beach during midwinter, because we're a little eccentric like that. You'll narrate here, I like that. A bit of eccentricity is good. Halfway through the walk, it started blizzarding something fierce, and we decided to head back to the car. On the way back to the car park, my brothers and I were complaining of being tired, hungry and thirsty. But my dad, who was born and raised in the area, assured us there was nowhere to buy food and drink anywhere near that particular beach. However, as we battled through the whiteout towards the car park, a building loomed in the distance out of the blizzard. It was a strange building, like an annex to a 60s/70s modern comprehensive school. People from the UK will know what style I mean. I do. And squeezed in between 4 hedgerows atop a spine of a long, flat sand dune, as though it was there first, and the ancient and haggard hedges had somehow grown up around it. Outside was a sandwich board advertising hot drinks and snacks, and so we all bundled on in. The place was packed. There must have been 4 or 5 dozen tables, and every single one was heaving with pensioners eating tea, toast, tea cake, soup, etc. When we arrived, there were no other cars in the car park, and the nearest bus stop was in the village at the end of the track, a good few miles away. So goodness knows where all these old people had come from. The room itself was very strange. The tables and chair were all mismatched and arranged around a glass display case on podiums filled with mouldering, taxidermied specimens of local wildlife. Except many of the examples were either creatures who lived nowhere near the area, hedgehogs, badgers, voles, etc., or animals that aren't native or very rare to the area. Cormorants, avocets, plovers, etc. At the center of the room was a squared-off spiral staircase leading to the upstairs, which, despite having no curtains visible from the outside and being in the middle of the day with a bright white snowstorm, was pitch dark. I mean so black we couldn't even see the top of the staircase banisters. We sat down, and my dad went off to get us some food. The oddest thing is that even at that age, I remember looking at the prices on the wall and being very confused because they were all in old money, with prices in halfpennies, sixpence, shillings, etc. It was an open-pass kitchen, and all the equipment behind it looked very old, or retro, I guess, as did the clothes of the very plump, happy women working behind the counter. When my dad came back for food, he couldn't stop talking about how amazingly cheap it was, and how the woman who served him spoke to him using ultra-specific regional dialect terms that he thought had completely died out decades ago. He said it was like being a schoolboy at the truck shop again. We ate our very, very generous and delicious tea cakes and hot chocolate, got back into our coats, hats, scarves, and gloves, and walked back into the still raging blizzard. The whole time we were there, not a single person entered or left, despite many tables clearly having finished eating before we'd even arrived. We battled back to the car, and with much difficulty maneuvered it back onto the track of the main road and headed home. In the years to come, we visited that beach again many, many times. The building was not there. Not only was it not there, there were no signs of it ever having been there. No rubble, no ruins, no footprints, no foundations, not even the ancient-looking hedges that it had squeezed itself inside of. Due to the beach being on a long promontory jutting out into a major shipping channel, the area has been fastidiously mapped for centuries. Using my student historical archive access, I studied maps of the area from roughly every decade right back to the early 19th century. And according to them, there was never ever a building on that site. Now, it's easy to think as I've grown older, I've become confused as to which beach we'd visited. But my dad, who was born and raised there, knew exactly which beach we were on. And the beach itself is very, very distinctive. A very long, thin teardrop spit of sand extending across a river estuary mouth. I know it must have been that beach because I remember seeing the red warning beacons at the top of the suspension bridge crossing the estuary, blinking through that blizzard. The place didn't exist, and had never existed. I ate tea cakes and drank hot chocolate with my family in a place that simply never was. All right, here goes my glitch in a matrix story. When I was a kid, my family and I went for a walk on a beach during midwinter because I feel like I've just read this story. I must have paced that one twice. Sorry, guys. Let's jump on to the next one. It was storming like mad when I drove home from work at 10 p.m. And I was on a 2-lane, 45-mile-per-hour, mostly straight country road with small rolling hills. The area has had a lot of population growth lately, so there's a ton more cars on the road at all hours now, so I'm used to getting stuck behind slow drivers. This road has also had deep drainage ditches on the sides because it's in a floodplain, and the road surface isn't in great condition either, so there's lots of deep puddles of standing water because the ditches were already overflowing by the time I'd left work. I have ADHD, and have a tendency of tailgating on autopilot, so I try very hard not to creep up on people. And the rain was so bad that it was like I was driving through a hurricane, so I left a good amount of space between our cars. The guy behind me was not happy that we were going under the speed limit, and goes to pass both me and the car in front of me, with a tractor-trailer coming over the hill in the opposite lane. Sad emoticon face inserted here. The guy behind me guns it and tries to burn past us both. And I had just enough time to say, "Oh, you dumb fuck," and my lizard brain must have realized my life was in immediate danger, and went on hyper alert or something, because time slowed down so much it was like I was watching a movie in slow motion. I see the dude try to speed around me. He loses traction, hydroplanes a little. I'm braking hard, seeing what's about to happen, and sliding a bit as well. But heavy trucks hauling a trailer can't stop on a dime. Certainly not with a heavy downpour. The truck driver is leaning on the horn, and the guy rips his car back into my lane between me and the car in front of me, and I swear to God, he went through the front end of my car. I drive an Elantra, so it's a fairly compact car, but I saw the tail end of his car intersect and pass through my car, like when a graphics clips with each other in video games. It looked like he just drove through me, like I was a ghost, or he was a ghost. But the truck saw him too. I have never wished I had an onboard dash camera more than that night, because I just want to verify that I'm not crazy. My proximity sensors were going crazy on my dashboard, so if he just missed me, it must have been by a micrometer, though my brain can't fathom how it happened. It makes me wonder if my parallel self in another dimension is now in a body bag somewhere in the morgue. I'm still baffled as to why I'm not in traction in the hospital right now because of some impatient jackass needing to win the Indy 500 on a flooded back road in goddamned monsoon. Yeah, that was an interesting story to narrate here. I've actually heard a couple of those where people say in times of extreme danger or stress, especially in car accidents right before impact or collision occurs, that they all agree on one thing, and that's that time seems to completely slow down. Have you ever had an experience of this? If so, I'd be genuinely interested, and you should leave something in the comments because I'd love to read it. Anyway, let's get on to our next glitch in the Matrix story. When I was 25, I was driving home from a paint store and was waiting at the stoplight on a freeway exit ramp. While waiting, I heard brakes of a car screeching behind me. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw that a car was about to hit my vehicle. The next thing I know, I am outside of my SUV, and I see the paint extension pole that I'd just purchased whoa, this is really dark. Trigger warning here. I see the paint extension pole that I'd just purchased rent right through my skull. Blood, brains, all scattered on my windshield. I remember just looking at the wreck. I wasn't scared, I wasn't particularly feeling anything. Then the next thing I remember, I'm sitting back inside my car. Again I hear the screeching brakes of the car behind me, and again I look in the mirror, and the car looks like it hit mine. But the car moves to the left and passes mine without hitting it. I went through the red light and managed to avoid crashing into anything. When the car passed me on the left, I swear the person in the passenger seat was looking at me with a look of surprise or horror, and in my mind I imagined they remembered or saw what I had. I remember sitting at the light for a few seconds thinking, what the hell just happened? It was such an odd thing to witness or make up in my head. I'd never had anything like that happen before. Then the light turned green and I just drove myself home. It just so happened that this outing was the very first time I'd ever left my body. So I just wanted to get home to her. Oh, your baby. I think it's the first time I'd ever left my baby. So I wanted to get home to her. Probably the first time you left your body too, I'm gonna bet. There is a part of me that believes that my body may have had a different soul, and my soul walked in. Oh yeah, they call it a walk-in. The accident was for the previous soul to experience the death, and my soul came into the body to live the rest of her life in this body. From what I've been told, walk-ins do spend time with the previous soul, so they're familiar with the life and the previous soul does stay for a while to assist the new soul in the body until integration is complete. The tween who saw me after this did tell me how much I'd changed. I had just gotten married and had a baby, so that changes a person too, I suppose. But the odd thing was, my hair used to be dark, huge and curly. Then after this experience, it started to straighten and turned grey. And this is my strange story. Yeah, that's a really good... It was funny how the last one as well was about a car crash. But this one's interesting. I think the walk-in concept of us walk-in being like a new soul exchanging of you, if you want to like check out, someone else can kind of inhabit your body. It's kind of like multiple personalities, but one person actually checks out and another person takes the driving seat, you know? But I think the story is more of a quantum immortality story. And the idea of quantum immortality, if you've not heard it, I'm sure many of you have, is that we actually die several times, often and frequently, but we just kind of skip forwards and keep going. So we perceive that the death hasn't happened, even though it really has. And the idea is that this just keeps going and you just keep existing in the world where you didn't die, even if in the other parallel world that accident truly did happen. Like, for example, the other day I have a spiral staircase and I was walking down it and I definitively slipped, like right at the top of the stairs, which would have just been really bad. And like I caught myself with both my arms. I almost pulled my like the top of my arm out of my shoulder blade, like out of the sockets. My whole body went forwards and I just managed to catch myself. But I wondered if, you know, in some other parallel universe out there, if I'd certainly fell to my death. You know, that's what it felt like. So yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that story. That's great. Speaking of quantum immortality stories, actually under this last one there is another comment, and I will read it to you. Mine isn't nearly as detailed as yours, but I too experienced a quantum immortality moment with my mum. I had a back injury from an old job and was going to physical therapy. My mum was driving me to and from appointments. The office was about 10 minutes from our house. On the drive back, we were yapping in a car, and a car almost T-boned us through the intersection. A close call, and shook us up pretty bad. But there's crazy drivers every day, so we just went back to yapping like usual. We distinctly remember taking a left back onto the main road near our house. But, in the distraction of conversation, we didn't realize that we somehow ended up on the other side of town. Like, completely different side of town. We would have had to have taken a right and several side roads to get to the stoplight we were at when we noticed. We started freaking out about how on earth we got to that road. And I was just in too much pain for a mindfuck to process, so we decided just to get home and we'll try to retrace our steps later. The insanely bizarre thing is, we made it home in the 10 minutes it would have usually taken us with a normal route. It wasn't physically possible to get from the doctor's office to that side of town and back home in that short of a time. It's somehow like time had stopped or skipped entirely. Next glitch in a Matrix story. I was young, 6 or maybe 7 at the time. Every time my best friend slept over, it would happen. I've tried to explain away it as a recurring nightmare, but there's just no way. To this day, my dreams don't make any sense. People, places, and things all look different in my dreams. It's very clearly not reality, but this dream was perfect. I would be in my room, every detail exactly the same. The teddy bear wallpaper, my knickknacks on the shelves, the spot on the wall where I wrote my name in crayon and blamed it on the dog. Everything, every detail, perfectly as it should be. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, in the dark, in my room. I'd look around and notice the shadows on the wall looked like shadows of forest animals. Deer, squirrels, rabbits. I tried to figure out what objects in my room were making these perfect shadows. As soon as I came to the realization, shit, I'm getting goosebumps right now, even typing this out, that there was nothing in the room that could possibly cast these shadows onto the wall, They would slowly blink and open their glowing red eyes. They would then peel off of a wall like you'd peel a sticker label off of a box. They'd hop off of the wall and run over to me and kick and bite me. I could never remember how it ended. I would just wake up the next morning. I don't know why, but I never told my parents about these dreams. It happened so many times, but I never told anyone. I was young, so I didn't have the idea to check for bruises the next day, but I was a clumsy kid, so I was covered in them anyway. I didn't experience sleep paralysis, but I do occasionally wake up in hypnopompic state and see giant shadow spiders crawl across my pillow. Terrifying, I know. A few years ago, my then 2-year-old son woke up screaming from his nap. This was normal for him. My oldest would sing herself awake, and she would just scream. I don't know, kids, am I right? He has very limited vocabulary at this point, but he managed to describe sleep paralysis, complete with the Hat Man to me. There's no way he could have known about the Hat Man at his age. Oh, you'd be surprised. But he told me about him. That was the proof I needed. Shadow entities are real. I've heard that they haunt generations of families. Well, as I was explaining his experience, then my childhood experience to my mum, she admitted to me that she sees shadow people occasionally. And that's it. I'm a believer for life. Your narrator, can I just say that I'm so happy that someone even wrote out the word hypnopompic in an experience that tells me it's more becoming hypnagogic hallucination, hypnopompic hallucination. It's more becoming a thing in the zeitgeist. So, thank you for even writing that in there. Before I tell the story, I need to preface the actual incident. As a preteen, I'd seen what fit the criteria for a UFO. I received a lot of criticism and accusations of lying about it until our local newspaper ran a story about sightings that matched my description, specifically in our neighborhood. So I felt vindicated, but I never really got over the bad reaction I received from simply sharing my experience. A couple of years later, when I was about 12 years old, I was out for the day with my grandmother. She was driving, and I was in the passenger seat with the window rolled down. I was idly watching the trees go by until there was an opening, and I saw a large elevated contraption. The clearing closed, and it was again obscured by trees before I had a chance to process it. But it gave me the impression of something like a horizontal construction crane. I wondered what the heck they would be building in that area. Then, quickly another larger opening in the trees came, and I could see clearly. The contraption wasn't a crane or even supported from the ground. It was suspended in the air. The trees quickly closed, obscuring it again. This all happened within maybe 15 to 20 seconds. I remember turning and facing forward, kind of shocked for a second before noticing my grandmother was leaning over and peering through the right side of the windshield in that direction. Then to me, with a perplexed expression, I asked, "Did you see that?" And she nodded. I asked her to describe it, and her description basically mirrored mine. She turned the car around to backtrack and got back in the same lane so we could see it again. Except we didn't. She then turned around again and drove much further back to try again, but we still couldn't see it. We spent about an hour crisscrossing streets towards that direction and never saw anything resembling or offering an explanation for what we had seen. What stood out to me most was the reflected sunlight highlighting what suggested to me to be pipes and machinery running across its length. But it didn't appear to be in motion, just suspended. My grandmother and I talked a lot about this over the years, but we kept it to ourselves. Me, because of my previous bad experience, and she said that no one would probably believe her either. Next glitch in the Matrix story. In April, I was in a traumatic rollover accident. I'm lucky that I escaped without a scratch. It was the scariest thing to ever happen to me. However, when I went back to work immediately, which I shouldn't have in retrospect, I was having what felt like timeline jumps. I felt like I was fighting to stay on my current timeline. I was losing moments of time here and there. One day, my co-worker and I were merchandising and cleaning displays. We were literally talking to each other back and forth. I asked her a question, and it was silent. I thought how effing rude. I looked around, and she was not there, even though we were in the middle of a conversation. So I thought. Maybe she decided to take a break and go to the back room since she wasn't in a lobby, or bent down behind the counters. I checked the bathroom, but it was empty. So I went back to doing what I was doing. Then 15 minutes went by, and she still wasn't in the room. So I shout her name as loud as I can. And then she's calmly like, "I'm right here. Why are you yelling for me?" I screamed because I was so startled. I started having a panic attack and crying because she said we were talking and she had been in the room the whole entire time, but I said she wasn't. I told her I went to ask her a question. She just disappeared. I was so freaked. I felt insane, but she believed me. There's an update to this story here. I did have a concussion, but all my scans were clear and normal. I had a CT and an MRI. And this only occurred in the first 3 weeks and hasn't happened since. So please, in the comments, stop telling me to go to a hospital, etc., because I did that. My co-worker and I cannot explain it. She was my passenger in my car when the accident happened too. A week exactly before the accident, I talked to a different co-worker who's very witchy. I told her I thought the universe was about to rock my shit and not in a good way. Her partner came in the day of the accident, and when they left, they said they felt like they were going to be in a car accident and needed to drive very carefully after interacting with me. That's super interesting. Also note here, as your narrator, I just want to apologize if you've been listening to this at any point and I've been stuttering or messing up my words. I say this because sometimes, I don't know if anyone else listening to this gets this, but sometimes before I get a particularly bad migraine, one of the interesting symptoms that I will experience, but lets me know in advance it's coming, is I have a very hard time with my words. It's almost like some of my speech becomes slightly slurred, or even if I'm thinking clearly, some of the words kind of skip, or I stutter on them, or they just don't come out right. So if you've heard any of that in this particular episode, I apologize for that. Now, let's get in one last glitch in the Matrix story, shall we? My husband and I decided to shop at Hobby Lobby. It was kind of a spur-of-the-moment decision. Anyways, we're in the store and we're browsing around. We get into an aisle that we want to walk down, and there's what looks to be a mother and a daughter standing in the middle of the aisles. Truthfully, they didn't look like actual mother and daughter, but explaining it this way just seems easier. The mum had bright pink hair with another colour. I think it was blue, and her hair was very long. The little girl looks like she was around 12. She wore a reddish pink dress, and I believe her hair was in a ponytail. So my hubby and I tried to walk down the aisle they're in, but they wouldn't budge. Like they clearly saw us with our cart, but simply weren't moving. We just shrugged it off, and so we go to the next aisle. We're looking around for a few seconds, and here comes a mother and daughter pair again into the aisle we're in. Except they aren't really trying to go around us, just kind of hanging out in the aisle. I got the sense they were trying to get us out of that aisle. Whatever. We leave the aisle and go to another part of the store. We're in another aisle, and suddenly the woman kind of like walks past our aisle, but also pops her head in as if she's somehow checking on us. I glare at her. She looks slightly affronted, and maybe a tiny bit scared, so she doesn't go back down our aisle. At this point, I'm getting annoyed by the situation, but I've also started to take notice. We wander the store for a while longer without running into them, until I see them again, sort of rushing past us as if not to make eye contact because they're embarrassed or something. I'm not thinking that much of it. This whole time we've been in the store, I haven't been doing super well. All I've had to eat up to this point was a big tub of popcorn. We went to the movies, and Hobby Lobby was just down the road. My stomach was not happy with me. We have a few items in our cart, but nothing we actually came for. I told my husband that I'm not doing good and that I actually want to go. He says okay, but suggests we put the items back since it didn't seem like it was worth getting them anyways. I've done that. I go to put one item back while he puts the cart away. And that's when I see them again. The mother/daughter duo are rushing out of the store. They haven't purchased anything either. We walk out to our car, which is parked a little bit further from all the other cars. There was a ton of open parking spots at the front of the store, but we parked a little further out to try and walk off the popcorn. As we approach the car, I see that there is only one car parked directly next to ours, and the mother/daughter rush into their car and drive off with the mum looking back at me with a weird expression that I couldn't place. And that's it. It was so weird. My hubby and I discussed how weird it was. We kept seeing them everywhere, but they also didn't buy anything in the store, and they left at the exact same time we did and parked right next to us, where there was plenty of other open parking. The whole thing just felt super bizarre. But every time I think about it, for some reason I am convinced that they were somehow time travelers, and I know to you that must seem crazy, but I don't know how else to describe the urgency in their actions to prevent us from just browsing. I also have no idea what they would have prevented if they were indeed time travelers, but I just can't logically make sense of any of it. Anyway, that's my weird glitch in the Matrix story. Alright, thank you everyone if you made it this far with Kitten. Thank you for listening tonight. And if you're not sleeping and you made it this far, thank you. Please do take a moment if you can just to comment anything below and like the video. It really does help the algorithm actually pick it up amongst all the AI stuff, but it's like little human reading stuff. And I so appreciate it. And I so appreciate all of you guys. Have a good night and sleep tight.